episode 293 of Retro Encounter. This is part 2 of Nights in the Nightmare, and I am Eva Padilla, and I'm joined by my friend Pete Leavitt. Pete, what's up?
Oh, just ruminating on the doom that follows the existence of all of us.
Yes, and we also played a video game.
Oh, we're not talking about... that's what I mean. That's what I mean.
So, as we previously mentioned, this is the second episode of our Nights in the Nightmare game journal. So, once again, Nights in the Nightmare is an RPG made by Sting, and it was first released on the Nintendo DS in the late 2000s and was released on PSP in 2010. And as we talked about in the last episode, a very unique and strange journey that we've been on. Massively tragic, massively weird, and I think it served all the better for it.
Yeah, the weirdness alone makes it worth it, and it's also fun. Like, you know, I mean, it's like a really easy bullet hell shooter you play with a stylus or an analog stick.
Now, dear listeners, this is going to be a bit of a disclaimer. I did not finish this game, mostly due to things in my personal life and work that prevented me from doing so. But I think as Pete and I will go through this game would still get a very full-throated recommendation from me in terms of what exactly it's doing, and as something that's so unique that I just really think you should experience it in some capacity. Give it a shot. And Pete, I think this is kind of similar to how you feel about it.
I love this game. I played this game for the first time like 5 years ago, and it was one of my favorite games I had played in a long time at that point. This is one of my favorite games. It's one I have a hard time shutting up about. So yeah, play this one. If you can, you should play it.
Now, I know we had talked about our histories with this game on the prior episode, but how did you, like where exactly did you hear about this game, or like how did you come across it?
I think I went through a brief period of I think I hit like random article on Hardcore Gaming 101 or something. Like, I don't think I sought this out. From what I remember, the first game in the series that I discovered was Yggdra Union, which we talked about last episode on the Game Boy Advance. And I loved that game, played that one first, and then went down kind of that rabbit hole. Hardcore Gaming 101 actually has a really good article on all of the Department Heaven games, including this one. And so I remember reading briefly, and then I stopped reading because I'm like, wait a minute, you don't move your units, they just are placed on the map, and they kind of can only face certain directions. I gotta figure out what the heck this is. And luckily, unlike now, when I sought it out, I was kind of collecting DS games, and it wasn't that expensive. But unfortunately, it kind of shot up in the stratosphere as far as price recently. But at the time, it wasn't that bad. And so I played it and bounced off it over and over. But just the complete weirdness of it and how it told its story really kept me coming back. Because there's so many rules. The game is only battles and story. And the rules of the battle system are not conventional at all. So it did take me like a few months of coming back to it and leaving it and coming back to it until I got the momentum. But yeah, that's pretty much how I discovered it and beyond.
Yeah, I love those where there isn't like a specific hype that you have for a game, but you just stumble across some sort of article or some sort of recommendation, and you think, you know what, that sounds like it'll be up my alley, and I think I should give that a shot. And whether that's with video games or music or movies or something, it's always nice to have those moments where something just kind of jumps in from out of nowhere and ends up grabbing your attention.
And when you're the one writing the article, is what you dream about, right? Because if you're writing about Nights in the Nightmare or Ogre Battle 64, maybe, for as a weird example out there, I guess, like, you're not really writing to a wide audience. So the most you can hope for is like the half dozen folks that read it and it like plants a seed in them, you know, and makes them want to continue to explore like what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. It's one thing to write. It's one thing to write an article about Star Wars where it's just kind of this given cultural commodity, but to be able to, be a booster for something that perhaps has flown under a lot of people's radars and might not be everyone's cup of tea, but could really be somebody's cup of tea. That's part of why this podcast is run and why RPG Fan is around, because we want to be able to boost these things that might be under the radar a bit.
We're lucky. We have a lot of staff who are into a lot of things outside of the mainstream. And so a lot of the folks that work with us talk often about stuff that I either haven't heard of or like only have heard of in passing in the passionate way that really gets me curious, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is probably going to be something that some listeners as well as some people on staff will hear when they hear about what exactly is going on in Nights in the Nightmare.
Yeah, for me, what I hope for is that, because obviously we're going to spoil it, and for me, when I hear about spoilers in an interesting game and it sounds cool, it just makes me want to play it. Instead of like, oh, now what? Like, now what? Now I'm going to play this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I can think of a time where I've been spoiled on a game and that has just made me that just has kept me off it. Or, there was a study done once that spoilers had actually led to more enjoyment for people who are reading a particular book. There was kind of a controlled study on that. And I found it very interesting because everyone complains about spoilers, but it seems that enjoyment is actually increased because your enjoyment isn't predicated on surprise and on just being shocked by something. It's actually by sitting with the text or the medium and vibing with what it's putting out, whether it's the first time or the fifth time you're experiencing it.
The fact that I've vibed so much with this game is maybe worrying. Maybe I should examine myself a little bit.
Oh, I don't think it's more worrying than how much I will boost Transistor to anyone who will listen, and even some people who won't.
Oh, preach that! I love Transistor. I'm a Transistor booster myself.
Yeah, and as some listeners might hear in a later episode of Retro Encounter, you'll see just the ferocity with which I go about that. So, but this is not a podcast about Transistor, though. We did that one too. It was real fun. So this, as we had said in the last episode, this is a game that is not necessarily character driven in terms of character development. This is a very plot heavy game, and Pete, there's a whole lot of dang plot in this, isn't there?
Where we left off last time, where we begin this time is where all the plot happens. I actually had forgotten how many threads there were. Like, but where we were when we finished the last episode, there were some threads that hadn't even been introduced yet, or maybe were just barely foreshadowed. And there's a lot of them.
Yeah, in the last episode, when we were talking about it, Maria wasn't even, I wasn't even playing as Maria yet. And her, I suppose to start with that, because that's pretty early on in these chapters, is when you finally get to control Maria. And Oh, it is like a breath of fresh air because you've been using all these characters who are so position specific, and you still have to do that as the game goes on. But when you get to use this Valkyrie, who is able to use all these different weapons, and isn't so constricted, it gives you that sort of initial jump in power. That this is a very powerful character who is able to move across the map, and she's able to use axes and swords, and she is kind of your everything.
Yeah, she this time around I played it on easy, which was pretty easy, but I played it on normal the first time, I think, and there is a lot of challenge in the battles at that point. And when you play on the harder difficulties, and when you have Maria in your party, some viable tactics spring up, such as moving her to a position where you can then, moving her to a position where she can reach other enemies. And the same goes for the other units who can move, like the knights and the duelists. Sometimes you want to move them around to a specific position and then swap them out with another unit that can attack in a different direction to better reach certain enemies or certain obstacles. And you can't swap Maria out, but her ability to move around gives you all that flexibility. You can only move her on an attack, so it's still not like a Final Fantasy Tactics where you select her and order her to move. Instead, you attack, and her chaos attack allows her to jump forward one space. It gets pretty cool when you're able to mix her in with the rest of your characters, because it's often a mixed party where you have her with other characters, and being able to have that tactical flexibility to perform the attacks in all different directions while you're dodging all the bullet patterns that the enemy shoot out at you gives it a lot more fun. And on the harder difficulty levels, it uses a lot more brain power. It's a bit more of a puzzle situation in some battles.
Right, yeah. So I was playing it on normal, and for that difficulty, yes, she's powerful, but it's still sort of a Michael Jordan situation. You know, you still need Scottie Pippen, you still need Dennis Rodman, you still need these other characters to support Maria, or she will not make it through. I've had to retry a couple of times because all of her vitality was drained by some sort of werewolf that was attacking her while she was charging up. Uh-huh. So, you can't just rely on her and just spam her attacks and make it through the entire game. That's just not how this is going to work. And I do always love that when a game can do that, where you think for a second, oh, they just handed me the win button. And the game responds by saying, no, not quite. We gave you a tool that is going to allow you to feel like you've gained something by putting time in, but it's not going to be an instant win button.
I love the idea that your units are the mid-90s Chicago Bulls. So let's see. Let's go through this. You got Michael Jordan is Maria, and then of the different classes, who would they be? Like, Dennis Rodman has got to be like the wizard, maybe, like someone who I don't use too much, but comes in handy sometimes.
Well, I would say Rodman is like the Lance Knight, because it feels like that perfect piece where I'm like, oh man, I am in trouble right now, and Dennis Rodman or the Lance Knight is like, I got you. I'm just gonna move. I'm just gonna lunge a few paces forward, and now your warrior can use his axe again or something. And it's like, thank you, Rodman Knight.
Yeah. Speaking of, I think, what is it? Like, Horace Grant's got to be the warrior. Like, he can attack from close, and also, can reach has some interesting patterns that can reach out that other characters can't quite reach. Your Steve Kerr is your archer, because that's just obvious. It's probably too obvious, actually.
Hey, no, you can't pass that up, though.
Yeah, Pippin is like the priestess. The wizard, because the chaos attack on the wizard is like this huge area, and Pippin does it all. I don't know. Who am I missing from the starting lineup?
Now I'm just thinking that Phil Jackson is the Wisp.
Get the heck out of here.
I'm just imagining just Phil Jackson's head for a mod just on the Wisp.
Oh, that's good. Oh man.
Oh man.
Hey, this game doesn't give you any comic relief. We'll provide it.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's just nonstop tragedy, we're just going to have to inject it in there. So I guess that makes sort of the underworld and the villains and stuff. I don't know, is that like the Bad Boy Pistons or something? Or we're stretching this. Yeah, like we're stretching this. We might be stretching this a bit too far, but you know what? Hey, it could happen.
Yeah. What? I'll go with the Bad Boy Pistons. Yeah. I mean, who is a greater rival? I mean, they're not the Utah Jazz. Like that's the other big rival from that time, I guess, for the Bulls. So. Anyway,
the Jazz. So as we go through that, yeah. So Maria is kind of given this enhanced role, but there's kind of more characters that you're still having to use to be able to move across the map. Sometimes there's going to be elevation challenges that Maria just can't get past. So you're a hermit, which is kind of like a thief or a ninja sort of class, is going to need to get to things. And each of these are going to have different charge up times. Each of these are going to be more vulnerable or less vulnerable. So it is a team effort. And animating this is always this wisp that you're playing as, the lost king, the dead king of this land. And when we're playing as him, I was thinking about this in terms of control as sort of this meta idea on how exactly we relate to video games and how everything on this map is basically just an outline until the wisp is going over it, until you're physically moving across it. And I think about it kind of like how we have these game consoles, these PCs, these handheld systems that just kind of remain inert unless we act on them. Until we do something to them, they are really not much of anything. They're not even fulfilling really their artistic purpose until you interact with them, until you hover that cursor, aka your hands, over the controller. And that might be a bit like I might be getting a bit too big brained about it, but I found that really interesting, and I really love that mechanic, and it made me connect with it.
I think it's cool to mention because while I still maintain that it's pretty clear that at least for the first 2/3 of the game, Maria is maybe the protagonist. You are supposed to embody the wisp, and the narrator refers to you in the second person, and will call you, the player, King Wilmgard or the Arbitrator or whatever, but speaking in the you conjugation, so it's I think it is much more poignantly, as you say, with this game in particular for that reason. But although the kingdom is, you come from the perspective of the king, you come from the perspective of the kingdom as the protagonist, as we do about wherever country we're from. Like if you're American, America is the protagonist in anywhere. If you're English, then England is the protagonist. Whatever it may be, excuse me. But you soon learn, as probably a lot of us, at least Americans learn as we get older, that the kingdom is not so protagonistic. Actually,
you don't say.
Yeah, and I like that about this game. Like, it really turns out that your kingdom is responsible for a lot of pain and hardship to your neighbors. And the first kind of group of people we meet are the Westkin. And it's hard to... They're not like a different nation, I don't think. And it's hard to tell if they're perhaps a different ethnic group or just like in a different economic class than obviously a king would be. Like if they're, you know, like lower, like a lower caste of citizens. But you're responsible for pretty horrific crimes against them, namely inflicting them with a curse that does not allow them to die and forcing them to perform all of the labor necessary to, you know, drive the economy of the kingdom.
Yeah, I mean it's truly this this class that is subjugated to just be pack mules in some way and just be this force for being the engine of the empire in a way. And whether they want to or not, this is kind of their lot.
Yeah, the first of these that you meet, her name is Vienna, and she's a witch, and she's this kind of disheveled, you know, semi-zombified type character, and she has a nice pet familiar bird who rests on her head. And when she speaks, one thing I think is pretty interesting about Vienna, aside from like her burning rage and grudge and thirst for revenge against the kingdom, especially after discovered that the king's spirit is like an active agent in the world, and her desire to kill him spiritually, I guess, is that when she speaks, all her text is in parentheses, and the bird will repeat, like it'll squawk like a one-word version of what she's saying, or a very short phrase version of what she's saying. And it made me think that maybe she doesn't speak, and maybe the bird speaks for her, but it doesn't explicitly say so, and it's hard to tell. And it seems that you, as the wisp, understands what she's saying. But it was kind of a cool little touch with her. Maybe she's just very quiet, very soft-spoken, but still super pissed off. But she seems like a young woman. And the elder of the Westkin is a guy by the name of Vilgo, who is like further along in the decomposing process. You actually fight him first before you fight Vienna. You see Vienna in a cutscene first, but you fight Vilgo first, and he is really mad, and he has all the right to be really mad. And they talk about the horrific state of their people and how, even though they're immortal, their bodies still kind of crumble away under the weight of the labor that they're forced to perform. And so most of them have died in a way because their bodies just completely fail, even though they're supposed to be immortal, like through abuse and just the unnatural state that they're in. They eventually cease to exist in some way. And it's this horrendous thing that your kingdom is responsible for perpetuating. And I think that in the case of King Wilmgard, your character, it seems like this is something that's been going on for generations. And, you know, often you hear about these kinds of situations where what becomes the norm is this horrible thing that some people who were there can only look back on in retrospect and understand what it actually was. And so it seems like this has been going on for so long that it was just the way it was. You, King Wilmgard doesn't know any better in a way, which is, you know, no excuse for the guy. But it's interesting that the game chooses to put you, the player, in that perspective.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're embodying the soul of the nation in some sort of way. And as you're going through this game, it kind of makes you question, do I want to embody the soul of a nation? And is this a place that's worth saving? And I think that's something that is, strangely enough, eminently relatable. You know, when you think about, perhaps you live in a country where you disagree with what the government does and many of its actions, wink, wink. But you're enlivened and brightened by those who live there, or things that are peripheral to it, and you have some sort of fondness for cultural touchstones and things. And I think that's part of what this game sort of embodies when you're playing as this lost king.
Around this time, we learn, it might be even before, but we learn something else that's important, that is interesting in the back, with all this as a backdrop, is that you, the king, are the arbitrator. And arbitrator is like a cosmic title that's passed down apparently genetically, and it happens to be in this royal line. And the role of the arbitrator is to maintain the separation and therefore the balance between the three worlds. There's the underworld, there's Riviera, which is like normal world, and then there's Asgard, which is like heaven. And this game is about a situation where that collapses and the worlds mingle. Even Asgard, you'll discover later, mingles with the rest of it, even though it's in a much smaller way than the Underworld. The Underworld unleashed a whole invasion force. But that's one of the reasons why your soul is animated and continues to push on, because there's this cosmic need to try to regain that order or correct it. And it's something that is very meta and very above, like a lot of people who are like spiritual might have hardships in their life, but maybe what gives them comfort is that they trust in something that's above all of it. You know what I mean? And it's almost that kind of thing where the king's consciousness or his role as the arbitrator does rise above the travails of the world in a way, and gives a sort of more top-down view, which is, could be very problematic. I mean, it could, if you're blinded to the material travails of the people, that still is a big old problem. But I think that tension is really cool in this game, because you're constantly being referred to as the arbitrator. Characters in the game refer to you as an arbitrator when they discover what actually is the deal. They kind of like, it's a revelation. Oh, this is the arbitrator. Oh man, like what are we going to do against the arbitrator? And then also the narrator lets you know that you're the arbitrator. And so it's just a fascinating tension between the cosmic, the material, and I don't think it gives any more importance over one than the other, which kind of fits how I personally feel. Like if you care about folks or are driven to care about folks, then you should care about their material well-being, not just, something beyond.
So yeah, I think that's really fascinating. And this narrator that you brought up and the role that they play in the story. So who exactly is this narrator?
You discover who the narrator is like in the second to last chapter of the game, like the very end. And who are they? I don't know, but they're awesome because they're this kind of otherworldly being who just observes humanity. And when the camera cuts to them as the game is ending, I don't know if you noticed this, but whenever the narrator's text come up, you hear a creaking sound. And that's because the narrator is like a skeletal person with a big old torn up robe on in a rocking chair who has a pet cat who lives in this completely dilapidated house, like no roof, just walls and like a chimney, but the fire is roaring. It's a very comfy situation. And there's a kitty cat that just kind of like is very, very cute. Not a zombie cat, not like a messed up cat or whatever, a super, super cute cat who hangs out with this skeleton who's telling this whole story, apparently. And his whole thing is like, humans, man, like they just never learn. They're so fascinating. There's a cool line where he says, all sacrifice for few and few sacrifice for all. Humans are truly puzzling. And I kind of paraphrase that, but that's kind of his whole thing is he just wants to figure out what is the deal with people. And it's like, yeah, and never does. There's no resolution by the end of the game. You don't ever learn this person's name. They're just in a rocking chair, apparently telling you the story. It's so great.
I think it's really fascinating that it goes in this direction.
It doesn't have to do it, is the thing. Like, why have this other thread that's just deliberately left hanging right in the wind just flapping around, like clearly on purpose, introduced at the very end of the game. And that's the kind of thing that could frustrate someone. I find it amazing. I think it's perfect.
Yeah, and for an RPG, this is not a Persona 5. This ain't like a Skyrim or something. It's relatively concise. And so getting to the end of it, even though this might sound a bit hypocritical coming from myself, getting to the end of it is not this Herculean 100-hour task. At least that's what it seems to be.
No, it's not. It's like around 25 hours or so.
So it kind of still captures that within a reasonable time frame. So having it be in the second to last part of it is still pretty fair game.
And to have the presence of mind as a narrative designer or something to like give them a cat that just apparently loves them, hangs out by the fire, goes to its feet, looks up and meows at it, like just the creative prowess on display is like nearly unmatched. I really find it awesome. There is another group of people that your kingdom has screwed over generations, and they are the Tiamats, who does act like a different nation. They are a different kind of, I guess, race of people or something. They are half dragon, so they have horns and they have wings. They have their own society and their own government, but very much like a puppet government, or not a puppet government, because they don't work for you, but they're like a much more symbolic government. They don't have any, they're technically part of your empire, but they don't have any rights. They're forced into land concessions over and over. And so Cape Horn, Cardinal Cape Horn, who we talked about, the big revelation here at this point is that he was a Tiamat, actually. So he was this half-dragon person, and he was well-respected, but kind of hot-tempered and very ambitious, and didn't have much regard for their very strict rules that they had for themselves. And he discovered a document that is the written down version of what's referred to as the unwritten law. And the unwritten law is basically the law that's supposed to keep all of what's happening from happening. Mm. It's the law that is supposed to separate the three worlds. It's a law that was agreed upon by the inhabitants of the three worlds many centuries ago or whatever. Cape Horn is so fed up with the oppression that he wants to apply this unwritten law to his advantage and disrupt it in order to basically free his people. But of course with no foresight. Just anyway, as a result of this taboo, he is exiled. And when the Tiamats exile their people, they cut off their wings and their horns, and they just send them away. Just at the gates of the place, basically, they just say, get out of here. And Cape Horn, being the ambitious son of a gun he is, went directly to this other kingdom and weaseled his way in there, worked his way up the power structure to get to where he is. And, of course, no one knows, because he doesn't have the telltale signs of the Tiamat. Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that they use Tiamat, because this is something that we see in a lot of different RPGs and such, of this Tima or Tiamat being used to denote some kind of dragon. You see in Final Fantasy, there's a Tiamat dragon. So I guess it's just become more of a trope to use that. Interesting, nonetheless, that they have this sort of class structure to their worlds that they have. You know, you have this lower class underworld. You have kind of the working middle, and then you have the titular department heaven.
I never quite thought of it that way, but that might be the case. Like, maybe that's why the underworld is so willing to break through and cause all this trouble, maybe it's not a nice place to be.
Yeah,
you know.
Who'd have thunk? Who'd have think that the underworld might be pretty gloomy.
Yeah, it might be a gloomy underworld instead of like a Tim Burton style. So the Tiamat, they have this elder who I'm not sure if he's the king. I think he's basically their Cape Horn, but he's a little bit more sympathetic. He comes up with a plot to send one of their top prospects, like a really strong warrior, very intelligent person named Algieri, to serve as kind of their like a spy on the king. And so the plan from the beginning was to get her in the good graces with the king, have her rise up the ranks of the knighthood and provide intel, and to try to seduce the king. But it turns out she falls in love with the king. Of course, this is an example of someone who voluntarily goes through the exile process in order to blend in, right? So she gets her horns cut off and her wings cut off. Mm-hmm. But she does become the king's lover, but sincerely falls in love with him. And according to this elder, the Tiamat elder, and as he explains it to their acting governess, who's Princess Allier, he explains to Princess Allier that perhaps they can mix the blood of Tiamats and humans and therefore create get the arbitrator's blood. So get like some of the arbitrator's DNA in with their people, and therefore they won't have to. I don't think they even know how it works or how it would work, but hopefully it would provide them some way to get some relief or give them some power to be able to govern for themselves more or to avoid being oppressed so much. Mm. And Algier is a cool character because she's very sympathetic. Like you don't know too much about her. Unfortunately, most of the time you spend with her, she's possessed by the witch Yelma to go back into the Tiamat lands and kind of infiltrate back, but on behalf of Yelma. But Algieri is so strong-willed that once she's in, she's able to throw off the possession. But she is actually a knight that you can recruit because she dies. She, like everyone else.
Nobody's useful until they die in this game.
Pretty much, but well, she's pretty useful up until that point. But it's quite poignant because although she does serve mostly as a love interest, there's a lot of lip service about like, oh, she's very strong, she's very intelligent, she's the perfect person for the job. She's essentially a love interest for the king. She's the one who tries to encourage him not to go to the meeting where they assassinate him in the first place. And so she serves as like the worried wife type character in that instance. But it was kind of touching for me because when you do recruit her, you recruit her with a lock of her hair that she gives you when you go on that trip. That's the key item that you give her. And she says, I'm so happy to be able to serve alongside you once more, or something like that. That's her like little 2-line text that she gives you for that. And then she's in your party. And just on a side note, there's actually like different endings you can get if you let her die. Oh gosh! Like if you let her vitality go down to 0, or if you sacrifice her through a system in the game we didn't talk about but don't have to, called Trans Soul, that potentially opens up different endings for you. But yeah, that's Algieri basically. Doesn't have much screen time. She really seems cooler than they let her be, but at least they let her seem as cool as she might be. There's sort of
a Captain Phasma sort of appeal to her, I suppose. Yeah, so something that you bring up that I found fascinating through a lot of this playthrough, and as another thing that we had mentioned a little bit of last episode, is these objects that we have to give to the characters to recruit them or to get special items for our team. It's amazing how much characterization, how much subtlety they put into just passing an item to someone, and what exactly that item means to them. can really have a strong effect on how you perceive that character. And it's unfortunate to think that some of these characters I just won't have recruited because I couldn't quite get their item when I was in a map. Because basically all of what you're going to learn about that character comes from that item.
Yeah, I love how they mix up non-combatants and combatants, and the combatants are the ones you can recruit. The non-combatants are just there, which obviously implies that they were there when that tragedy happened and died, caught up in the crossfire. And so much of it is because as you say, like, you know, there's no real there's not much characterization. It's very quick, it's very subtle, it's very efficient in how it delivers these characters' little bit of story. And it's just heartbreaking stuff all the time. Like, real quick, I gotta, sorry, this is something we can edit out, but I want to pull up this image because I forget the exact quote of one of the non-combatants. You give them an item, and it's just like crushing what they say. Oh, there's one character who is not a knight you can recruit, just an innocent person that died there. Her name is Lucana, and you can give her a 4-leaf clover. Mm-hmm. And she says, "I wonder if these really bring good luck." And it's like, oh my gosh, you are dead. Or like there's a musician named Donald, and you can give them sheet music, and he says, "I don't need sheet music anymore."
Oh, we got a jazz guy in the house, I guess.
So, okay, oh sure, that's where you're gonna go with that one. And Dahlia, who is a knight, she's a priestess. You give her a diary, and it says, "My diary holds my memories. It's proof I was alive." And that's what all of these are. 2 lines, 1 or 2 sentences, straight dagger to the heart. Like, it's just incredible.
Remember that once we lived, or remember that we once lived. It is really powerful that these outlines that you have and these functions that you have on a grid essentially are kind of making a pull at your heartstrings and a pull for you to understand that yes, you might be kind of animating my actions now as we're looking into the past, but at one point I was independent. I had my own free will, and now this is something that's been taken away from me. This is what my afterlife consists of, is kind of being enthroned to this little ball of light that carries the soul of a dead king across a map.
Yeah, they managed to do a lot. I mean, this is one of the great examples of something I often talk about and think about, is like efficiency of delivery of narrative. Mm-hmm. Like, how much can you get out, and how in how few or how many words. And I think about it a lot because when I write, I don't write too much narrative stuff, but when I write really needlessly wordy and like unnecessarily roundabout and loopy-loop. And when I see that kind of writing, it's when it works, and it works consistently in this game, it's incredible to me. So after we learn about Algieri, and we jumped ahead a little bit, because again, these are story threads that go off and you leave them behind, you pick them up later. That's essentially Algieri's story thread, right? So we go to the collapsed tower, the Tower of Babel type thing that the Tiamats tried to build up to communicate their plight to Asgard, and was struck down because of their audacity to do so. We find Peach, little innocent Princess Peach, who is like a monster now, who was forced to turn her, was turned into a monster by Zolgonark and the Underworld as punishment to Cape Horn. And when you fight a boss, you'll see their name in between rounds, and they typically have a title, and Peach's is Peach the Tragedy. And one thing this game does over and over is like make you feel bad. It's like, oh, King Wilmgard scion of the arbitrator, how many will you kill? Like, this pile of bodies behind you, how many more will die, and for what? And you kill Peach, and it's like, this was an innocent life that you just killed. How many more will there be? It just does that over and over. And then this is when Princess Allier, so the Tiamat princess, sends one of her agents, well, actually a team of agents, into the kingdom to steal the king's body, because everyone's kind of going for the king's body, but her agents managed to get there first, and they bring it to her, and she uses her power to seal up the king's body as like a protective measure so no one can get to it. She doesn't seek to use it for herself. She wouldn't even like know how, but she seals up the body so that no one can get to it. But of course, Yelma, the witch, who tries to possess people and kind of does but kind of fails all the time, that's who she wants. She wants that corpse. And Princess Allier seals up the body and then goes directly to fight you, because you killed her agent that went to go get the body. That's the end of the game. Almost turns into a boss rush. It's like there'll be 3 bosses in a row, and then like a normal mission, and then a boss, and then a normal mission, and a boss, and then 2 more bosses, and it just kind of throws a whole lot of bosses in at the end. And so right after you kill her agent, you fight her, and her whole thing is like, our race is over. Like, the Tiamat, they're over, and there's no hope for us whatsoever. There's no way I can even kill, the arbitrator, but I gotta go down fighting. We're gonna go down fighting. It's all we can do. And then, so she's a really sympathetic character. Nothing about her is like evil or overly ambitious or anything. She's like someone who's to do the right thing. And once she dies, the seal breaks, and Yelma is right there. Like, hilariously, Yelma walks into the room where the king is, and she's like, "Oh, okay, a little seal. I can get past this." Then she can't, right? She tries everything, she can't do it, and she just like throws a fit. And when you kill Allier, Yelma's still there, like sulking in the room. Like, she just bummed out in the room, and then the seal shatters, and she's like, "Oh, okay." Here we go. I guess she attached this seal to her body, so when she died, the seal broke. Great. Well, she's dead too. That's no problem for me. Yelma's a great, like, fit thrower, childish type character who is also capable of, inflicting a lot of pain. And then she possesses the king's body. So she's able, like, she's been possessing all the other people. The difference I think the game is trying to make is the other people are still alive. They have their will, and her possession, her attempts at possession, haven't ever quite been able to overcome the willpower of the subjects. But here she tries to just possess a corpse, and she manages to do it. And it's kind of funny because she's like Yelma in the king's body, and she still talks like Yelma in the text. So, Yelma's walking around in the king's body, and she goes directly to Zolganark, and she tries to threaten him. She says, "I have the arbitrator's body. I have all the power, and now I have power over you." And Zolganark, for being like a monstrosity, has some pretty good characterization. He's kind of funny. He's like, "Okay, go ahead. Why don't you just give it a try?" And of course, she can't do a single thing to him. And so Yelma, who's this like super chaotic, evil character throughout this whole game, you don't even fight her because Zolganark just murders her right there. And you actually see a little wisp come out of the king's body, which is, I guess, is supposed to be her soul, right? And it disintegrates. So she's like super gone. And yeah, we're on to the penultimate boss. A big old 3-headed guy, Zolganark. Did you get a chance to check out his design at all?
Yes. This was the skeleton, right? The skeleton stretching over?
That's coming up.
That's coming up. That is the ultimate.
But while he's still alive, anyway, yeah, we might have given something away there, but that's okay. Like, he's like a sort of a Hydra type character, or Cerberus. He has 3 different heads to like attach to like a nondescript body. Maybe some crocodile, like one of the heads is a skeleton.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and it is a weeping and a moaning and a gnashing of teeth right now. That's all I'm seeing.
There's some good art of him. It makes you like, I just look at that and I wonder how one would come up with something like that. But
only in nightmares.
He's very nightmarish. So you fight him, and it's a tough fight. A lot of bullet patterns. You gotta get down. The 2 heads will heal each other, but eventually you defeat him, and his corpse is there. It's kind of like partially decomposed, but you can see his spinal column, his rib cage, and his skull. And it might have been before this fight, but you learned that Maria is actually an angel from Asgard. And she came down when she noticed the rule being broken. She was sent down. But she comes down and she makes a deal with Zolganark because she feels that she doesn't have enough power to right all the wrongs in order to at least keep Asgard out of this chaos that's about to happen. And Zolganark promises her more power, and as he does it, he splits her into 2 beings. So there's Melissa, who you've had several boss fights with up to this point. That's her. So they're split into like orderly and chaotic versions of the same person. So Maria, the one helping you, is the quote-unquote good version, and Melissa is the chaotic version that Zolganark is using as a pawn. So Melissa comes down when you defeat Zolganark and notices that he's dead and that she can take his power and get what she/they always wanted, which is more power to do more good. And Maria, of course, understands this folly and tries to get her to stop, but she won't listen. And so Melissa hoists Zolganark's like rib cage and spine and remains over her shoulders and turns into perhaps my favorite final boss of any JRPG. Like, people at home need to go look up this design. It's gruesome. It's incredible. It's a little bit more cohesive artistically than Zolganark, but just like on a guttural, like, or not on a visceral level inside of like a person laying eyes on this creature, it has a huge effect. At least for me, it's an incredible design. It's
this Melod Margus design as she
changes her name to Melod Margus. Yeah,
as she begins to call herself. Yeah, it is just this rib cage and partial cattle skull stretched over this humanoid body with these just absolutely terrible kind of seraphic wings, and then there's also kind of demonic wings that are behind it. I mean, it is truly something. It is truly an inspired design.
Yeah, all the design and art, character art in this game is special, but this is the peak. This design is like such a cool. As a character, she's nothing. She's like, oh, I have the power now. You know, no one can stand in my way. But as a design, that tells the whole story that you would want from her. And her fight is cool. She has some cool, unique bullet patterns. My favorite one that she does is huge claws slicing in from either side of the screen. So superimposed are these huge claw marks, and then the claw marks begin to bleed, and the blood dripping down is actually acts like a bullet, so it'll hit you and take away time if you like fly into it. But you know, you defeat Milad Margus. It's all over. And the ending I got that for me is canonical. There is a good ending to this game, I should say, where you're able to recuperate your body. You are able to resurrect Algieri, and from what I remember, you're. I don't think the whole world is restored, but you're able to there's hope, It's it's still an apocalypse, but hey, maybe I don't know. Maybe you can restore it in some way or do some things differently or whatever. But the ending I got that I feel is canonical is the Wisp, who is disembodied and lives in a hellscape with nearly no survivors, and Maria, who broke the laws of Asgard by making a deal with the underworld and is completely unable to return, wander the land, both unable to die, just witnessing constant desolation with nowhere to go. And that's how the game ends. And it's pretty great. It seems like a cop-out type ending, or the reverse Deus Ex Machina, everyone dies ending, which is not very strong, but for some reason, personally, I feel it's an ending that this game earns, and is very much in keeping with what this game, I feel, is trying to do. And I find it satisfying. I find it much better than, they were able to restore the world or some part of it.
There seems to me, that sounds like there's a strange sort of companionship to that. That's the game kind of extending a hand and just being okay, walk with us through this desolation. That's what this game has been about. It hasn't been about happy endings. I mean, every scene in this is just a recreation of a tragic circumstance. So why exactly would a happier ending be kind of the canonical one? So I would be inclined to agree with you on that, at least.
It is a little bit sweet, though, in that way, where Maria, she looks out across the beach, and you can see the castle in the distance. It's that iconic shot of the castle on the cliff in the distance. And she says, I can't go back. I'm stuck here. And she turns to you and she says, she reaches out her hands and she goes, let's go, King Wilmgard, and just walk away. And then later on, there's another scene where they're walking up the western hills, and she turns and looks at him and she says, if I were Melissa, if I were in her position, I don't know what I would do differently, if anything at all. I guess I'll never know. And that's just the end of the game.
It's not exactly chilling. It gives me goosebumps in a way. But there is a sort of warmth to it that I find rather beautiful. Wow, I think I really want to see that. Yeah,
it's worth it to do. And that throwaway line of I don't know what I would do in her position does actually get a little bit of a fulfillment. You can begin a new game plus by loading a cleared file, and you can play the game again on a blue path. And instead of Maria being the armored maiden who steals your soul away, it's Melia, who I think is supposed to actually be Melissa.
Oh.
And there's subtle differences in the story, and I'm pretty sure it's Maria is the chaotic angel and Melia isn't, or maybe Zolganark just manages to get a hold of Maria. Maybe she still is the order oriented one. I'm not sure. Unfortunately I wasn't able to do too much research, and I've never played the blue path, but there is that, and there are some differences in bosses. Obviously, instead of fighting Melissa, I guess you fight Maria, and so it's pretty. Just I think it's not meant to be canonical or whatever, but it is neat, I guess, that they decided to throw that in. And if you have the Yggdra Union Game Boy Advance cartridge and you have it in your DS, you have the option of playing as Yggdra, or rather, the Armored Maiden is Yggdra, and I don't know anything about that playthrough. But from my understanding, there's not much different. But it's just kind of a cool Easter egg in there.
That's such an interesting little touch, and I always loved when any DS game was utilizing that Game Boy Advance cartridge well. I know Pokemon had a very interesting sort of transfer system that they had for it. So even just a nice touch like that of being able to utilize Yggdra Union with it, I dig that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And that kind of wraps up the story and the plot of Nights in the Nightmare.
That's the game.
That is the game. So, as we had said earlier, I had not gotten to finishing the game, although Pete, you had. But hearing you talk about it and having you from what I'd already seen and then you showing me these designs and talking about this ending, it's something that I really want to see. I really want to experience it, and I want to sit with this game more. And I hope, dear listener, that my not finishing it has not turned anybody off from it, because I think this is a very interesting and worthy game that if you have the ability to access it, that you should give a shot to.
But yeah, if you can get this game, it's so creative. It's unique to a degree that it's so outside the box. It's so unconventional. That alone is worth it. But the fact of the matter is, it does play awesome. And it probably isn't for everybody. The fact that I bounced off of it for many months before getting into the groove is proof of that. But you can't find, if you're looking for something different, you can't find many games that are much more different than this within the kind of JRPG realm or the tactics RPG realm. I mean, there are games that are weirder than this. I understand that, but but it is really worthwhile, and it deals with heavy subjects in a way that, while maybe they're not, maybe not in an overly complex way, in a very respectful way, and I would even say thought-provoking. The constant exploration of tragedy is not something you see. There's in any smart media, there's some way to break up the tone, and in some ways, I feel this game breaks a lot of rules, including that one. But I feel it does it in a way that it earns, like in a way that a jazz musician breaks the rules of music. Nights of the Nightmare breaks some of the rules of character design and of definitely of tone and of what you might expect from a narrative, and manages to pull it off.
That's truly what it seems to be to me, and I have to thank you, Pete, for kind of being the booster for this game and being like, Eva, we've got to play this game. This is really something, and you mentioning this to me for quite a while, and I'm very glad that we got around to doing this and to talking about this game. And I'm looking forward to finishing it and being able to message you, being like, oh yeah, this rules.
Or like, I can't stand it. Either way, it works for me. I look forward to that.
Any sort of feelings are good, because this is a game that, one way or another, I think you're going to feel some way about it.
Yeah, it's brave. It's brave about putting what it has to put out there, and letting you feel however you're going to feel about it.
So, listener, thank you for embarking on this journey with us through the 2 parts of Nights in the Nightmare that we've gone over. If you've liked or enjoyed this podcast, we would ask for you to like or review us on the podcatcher of your choice. Any of them is great and fabulous. We here at RPG Fan have 3 other fine podcasts. Phoenix Edge, which is about current events, Random Encounter, which is about randomness, and Rhythm Encounter, which is about RPG music. Next month, we have some podcasts on Nier Hakuoki, and a very special episode indeed. So, with that, Pete, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. If listeners are trying to find you out on the internet, where would be the best place for that?
Wandering the desolate and decaying world with an disembodied spirit. Also on Twitter at PeteBarbero1 and on Twitch at Eva, don't make me laugh. Twitch.tv/RGHalfpenny. Right now on Twitch, I'm playing Mech Warrior. So if that sounds interesting to you, that's what I'm doing. And be on the lookout later on for some RPG stuff and occasional Genshin Impact, because I am a smart and cool person.
And listeners, if you're looking to find this wandering spirit as well, you can find me on Twitter as @EVA_LEES, or you can find me on RPG Fans General social media accounts. So everyone, thank you so much for stepping into the nightmare with us. Thank you. Good night. And to seal a bit from our usual host, Michael Solosi, good luck.